against such hate. I'm now pleased to turn the podium over to U.S. Attorney Trini Ross. I'll return afterwards for a few questions.
Thank you, Attorney Garland, for your strong support of this community during this difficult time, and thank you for your leadership. My name is Trini Ross, and I am the United States Attorney for the Western District of New York. I was born and raised in the city of Buffalo, attended Buffalo Public Schools, and continue to be a very proud Buffalonian. On the afternoon of March 14th, I received a call that no chief law enforcement officer ever wants to receive. Sorry, I said March, and I mean May 14th. There had been a mass shooting at the Tops Friendly Market on Jefferson Avenue, and there were multiple fatalities on scene. Immediately after receiving the call, I assembled a team from the United States Attorney's Office and put them into action. We have not stopped since that day, and we will not stop until this case comes to a conclusion. As a former career prosecutor with over 23 years as an assistant United States attorney, when I was sworn in as the U.S. Attorney, I fully understood that racially motivated violence was increasing across this country and that it represented a threat to all Americans. Still, there are no words that can adequately capture what it meant to see this sort of terror come to Buffalo and to wreak havoc in our community. As alleged in the complaint, the defendant spent months planning and arming himself for an attack that would target Black residents of Jefferson Avenue. We know the horrific outcome. 10 people killed, 3 people injured, and a community terrorized. But as you are aware, every defendant is innocent until proven guilty. We must prove these allegations, and we intend to do so. Since the day of this attack, we have worked tirelessly to respond, and we will continue to respond until this case is concluded. I want to commend and thank all of the local and federal officials who have committed themselves to addressing this unspeakable tragedy. I know I speak for all of us when I say we will do everything in our power to hold the shooter accountable and to secure as much justice as we possibly can for the victims, their families, and this community. This process may not be as fast as some would hope, but it will be thorough, it will be fair, it will be comprehensive, and it will reflect what is best about our community and about democracy. I would now like to invite Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta to take the microphone.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Ross. It is tragic that we are standing here in the aftermath of such a horrifying act of violence, and we grieve with the families who lost loved ones and for this whole community. Hate crimes are insidious. They instill fear across entire communities, and they undermine the principles upon which our democracy stands. No person and no community should ever have to experience this. As the Attorney General mentioned, around the time that the Justice Department was founded, the Ku Klux Klan was carrying out a reign of terror against Black Americans. More than 150 years later, white supremacists are still terrorizing Black Americans and other communities of color, and the Justice Department will not tolerate it. The Justice Department's top priority is holding accountable those who commit these heinous acts. But we must all continue to combat hate and discrimination in all of its forms and address them before they ever escalate to violence. Every community deserves to feel safe and protected. Through vital grant programs and technical assistance, the department is working diligently to support victims and jurisdictions that have experienced these traumatic incidents of mass violence. Here in Buffalo, the Office for Victims of Crime deployed 2 expert mass violence consultants to work with the community and state officials and ensure that everyone who needs and wants services has continued access to mental health and other resources. The Justice Department stands with you, and we will continue working to make real this nation's promise of justice and equality under the law. I am now going to pass it to Assistant Attorney General Clark.
Thank you, Associate Attorney General Gupta, and Mr. Attorney General and colleagues. Today, I join my colleagues in grieving the innocent victims of this senseless crime and expressing my condolences to their families and the Buffalo community that has suffered through this traumatic event. I grieve with you as a New Yorker, as a Black woman, and as Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. Every day we see evidence that racially motivated hate crimes are on the rise across our country. According to the FBI's most recent data, most victims of racially motivated hate crimes are Black. These acts of hate are a stain on our democracy and have no place in our society. Let me be clear. The Civil Rights Division and the entire Justice Department will not stand by idly in the fight against white supremacist-fueled violence. As Attorney General Garland noted, we will pursue the perpetrators of hate crimes and hold them accountable. And we will be vigilant in our quest to secure justice for the victims and their families. Prosecutions alone will not stop the spread of hate. That's why the Justice Department is also hard at work addressing non-criminal acts of bias that rear their ugly head inside our schools, workplaces, and our neighborhoods. We're also addressing the need for hate crime prevention through education and awareness. This multi-part strategy is critical to eliminating hate, root and branch. Today, we charge this defendant with violating the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, alleging he murdered 10 innocent people and attempted to murder 3 others with a firearm because he wanted to kill and injure Black people. A core mission of the Civil Rights Division is the fight against the scourge of hate crimes, to prevent them, prosecute them, and remedy the harms they cause to communities. That is our duty, and we intend to fulfill it. I want to now invite Deputy Director of the FBI to speak.
Thank you, Assistant Attorney General Clark, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by expressing my deepest condolences to the victims, to the families and loved ones of those murdered and injured in this vicious attack. We recognize the enduring threat posed by those who commit hate crimes and acts of violent extremism and the devastating impact on people and communities. Taking action against these threats is our highest priority. The full weight and resources of the Department of Justice and the FBI have been brought to bear in this investigation and have involved hundreds of personnel from our Buffalo field office and across the country to support the victims and this community and to engage in the relentless pursuit of justice. The FBI's National Evidence Response Team, along with teams from Buffalo and other field offices, deployed specialized technical equipment for the evidence recovery operation that will be crucial to the successful prosecution and the attainment of justice in this case. A community resource center was established by FBI victim specialists in collaboration with our state and local counterparts to provide essential support and assistance to those impacted by this unimaginable tragedy. Strong, well-established relationships with our law enforcement partners have been indispensable to this response and investigation, and we cannot thank our partners enough for their steadfast commitment and unyielding efforts to help others. We immediately identified this attack as a hate crime and an act of racially motivated violent extremism directed at the very heart of this community. And we've been determined from the beginning to do our part to hold accountable the person who committed this horrific attack and to help this community heal. We remain committed in our work to protect life and freedom, to help and support those who've been victimized, and to seek swift and absolute justice against those who commit acts of violence and terror driven by hate. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with always all who have been so severely impacted by this terrible tragedy. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll take some questions. Let's start with Carolyn Thompson from the Associated Press.
Hi. Ms. Ross, will you seek the death penalty? Mr. Garland, would you approve it if sought?
This is a death penalty eligible crime. The Justice Department has a series of procedures that follows. First, of course, there has to be an indictment. After the indictment, then the regulatory procedures will be followed, and the families and the survivors will be consulted.
All right, Sadie Gerber, Wall Street Journal.
Hi there. So the gunman in this case was an 18-year-old who used an assault rifle. The current framework being considered by Congress does not include a provision that would raise the minimum age to 21 to purchase such a gun. Should it include such a provision, and what else would the Justice Department like to see in any legislation that Congress is considering to help fight gun crime?
So the Justice Department agrees with the President that 18-year-olds should not be able to purchase a gun like this. Right now, there are meaningful negotiations going on in Congress with respect to a framework, and we look forward to assisting Congress in any way we can in bringing those to fruition.
Eileen Buckley.
You talked to the families. Did they tell you, if you can say, that they want the death penalty to be pursued?
So I came here specifically to talk to the families, to express our support and our deepest sympathy for what happened to them, and to tell them exactly what we are charging in the complaint. Out of respect for their privacy, I think I shouldn't share any more than that.
Right, Chris Strong.
Mr. Attorney General, can you talk about what the investigation is learning in terms of what kind of communications the individual may have had with others, and were others involved in the plotting, or at least the inciting the individual?
So let me just begin to be clear that the complaint itself charges only a single defendant, Mr. Gendron. The investigation is ongoing, and I think I'll turn it over to the Deputy Director of the FBI for further discussion about the investigation.
Yes, sir. As the
Attorney General.
As the Attorney General stated, the investigation is active and ongoing, and we're leaving no stone unturned. That's something that we're continuing to look at. Anyone who is connected with, associated with, in communication with this individual, we're continuing to pursue that, and we'll see where it leads. If it leads us to a place where justice is warranted, we'll go there.
Maki Becker.
Could you explain the process of seeking the death penalty and what happens in terms of the sentencing for that?
There's a Justice Department manual and regulations that were established when Janet Reno was the Attorney General that established a process for discussion of an evaluation of whether the death penalty is appropriate in individual cases, and in particular, it involves discussions with which the U.S. Attorney will have with the families and the survivors, and that's really all I can say at this point.
Jake Gibson.
Thank you very much. Forgive me for an off-topic question, but there have been some criticisms about the protests going on outside of justices' homes, and calls for those individuals to be prosecuted. Do you have any comment on those criticisms?
So the Justice Department takes extraordinarily seriously any violence, criminal threats of violence, intimidation, harassment of the justices or of any government officials. For that reason, we swiftly moved to provide 24/7 protection for the justices, including of their residences. For that reason, I called a meeting with the Marshal of the Supreme Court, with the Director of the Marshal Service, with the Deputy Director of the FBI, and with our prosecutors, right from the very beginning, to be sure that we were assessing all possible threats and providing all resources available. I also met with the judges, Judge Salas and Judge Sullivan, of the Judicial Conferences Committee on Judicial Security, pledged our full support as well as our support for the legislation that they're seeking. There is currently legislation passing through Congress, and the Justice Department is extremely supportive of that security legislation.
So we understand, and there are reports that the suspect was in a chat room with others and could have even told them about the shooting. Are there plans for charges against those people, or does the investigation include looking into that chat room for details?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, as the Deputy Director said, the investigation is ongoing, and that includes all aspects of who the defendant spoke with at any time. That's a normal administrative course for our investigations. I don't know if Paul wants to say any more.
The same. We're pursuing every avenue, again, leaving no stone unturned in this, and we're looking at everyone who may have been in communication with this individual leading up to the attack.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
As a follow-up, was there any indication that the shooter received help from anyone?